or cetaceans. This is used to be the order Cetacea, and I'll talk ad nauseum about why that's no longer the case. When we talked about bats, those are the chiropterans, that's an order. If you talk about rodents, that's an order. These used to be an order. They've been downgraded. They're no longer considered an order, and I'll tell you why here a little bit later. With that, whales, just a couple of general characteristics. They're marine. They're not aquatic or amphibious. They're considered marine, and the definition is they never leave the water. They're born in the water. They live their whole lives in the water unless they unintentionally beach, and they die in the water. Totally marine. There's only one other group of mammals that is totally marine, and those are the sirenians, which are the dugong and the manatees. There's 3 species of manatees, 1 of dugong. Those are totally marine as well, but they're totally different from whales. They're not related to whales at all. Whales are found in all the oceans, but which is, but they're also found actually in some rivers, and even some freshwater lakes have small whales in them. They're, again, not to get overly taxonomic, there's 11 families, 40 genera. So it's not a real huge group. I mean, they're huge physically, but in terms of species diversity, they're not real big. They are sort of remarkable in terms of overall morphology, how big they are. The smallest whale, which is probably Heaviside's dolphin, is about 4 feet long and about 50 pounds. You've all got grandkids who are bigger than 4 feet and 50 pounds, probably. Although the largest animal that has ever lived on the planet is the blue whale, and that's about 120 feet and weighs about 136 tons. And the reason it can get so big, of course, it's in the water. Specifically, it's in salt water, and salt water is very buoyant. And so you can get that big as an animal and still survive, because if you were on land, of course, and you had 4 legs, those 4 legs couldn't hold up 136 tons. But you can get that big if you're a marine mammal. And baleen whales, like blue whales, have done just that. The term fusiform is used for, interestingly enough, both for pocket gophers and whales. It simply means torpedo shape or cigar shape, in that there's no hind limbs over here. Whales, even this, I forget common names sometimes. This is the, my mind went blank. It'll come back to me. It's the one everybody watches, humpback. It's a humpback whale, Moronga angustirostris. I can't remember common names. These whales are all very cigar shaped. And that is so that you get what's called laminar flow. When they move through the water, they want the least amount of resistance possible. And if you remember when we talked about bats last week, there's 4 elements in something moving through the air or through the water. And that's propulsion, has to overcome drag, lift has to overcome gravity. In the case of whales, they have buoyancy as opposed to lift. But one of the things they also have for propulsion to reduce drag is what's called laminar flow, the least amount of resistance, turbulence over the body as they move forward through the water. And you can see this guy is like all whales, very long and sleek, and not a lot of water turbulence. That tail, quote unquote, it's a fluke. It's actually physically different from a tail, but it's in a horizontal plane. All fishes have their tail in a vertical plane, don't they? The tail is up and down relative to to the axis of the body. Aristotle actually recognized this in whales, and he classified them as a mammal based on that horizontal fluke or tail. That was lost during much of the Dark Ages, and they were considered to be fish again. But Aristotle had it right a couple thousand years ago. All whales have blubber. That blubber comes and goes. They put on a lot of body fat to make it through the winter when there's less food available. During the summer, most of them move up to feeding grounds, at least mysticets, and then they put on a lot of weight during the summer. The external nares, the nares are the nostrils. Oh, my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
That's not a note you generally want to see. External nares go through the top of the head, and the skulls are what's called telescoped, so that those nostrils have moved from the front of the face up to the top of the head. And that's so that when they surface, that just the very top of the head has to come up. They blow. You've heard that term. They exhale a couple of times. They're breathing, they're repaying their oxygen debt after a dive. And then they can just submerge again without really exposing themselves to anything above the water, which is very useful because if you think about it, they're highly adapted, but when you're swimming at the surface of the water, you really don't have much of an idea of what's around you at any distance. And one of the reasons that whales do this, it's believed, is to get a better look of what's around them off in the distance. Blubber, external nares, and the vertebrae, well, that doesn't mean anything. There are certain terrestrial mammals that have very elaborate vertebrae in their back. Their thoracic lumbar vertebrae are highly articulated, and they actually have, they're a lot more structurally diverse than whales, because whales really don't have to, if everything goes right, they're not going to be on land. They've got buoyant water. They don't need fancy vertebrae for support. And so that's what you see, very simple vertebrae. I don't know if you guys have this little message up here. I don't know how you get rid of that.
No.
I've got to, oh shoot, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Anyway, whales are now, I told you, they're no longer considered an order. There are a couple of suborders, but these are the parv orders now. They've been relegated to lower in the taxonomic domain. And we talked about this on the first go round. There's domains. You probably didn't learn domains in high school or college. I certainly didn't. But there's 3 domains, which I won't again get into, and then there's the kingdoms that you're probably familiar with: phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And we've been talking about orders here. Well, there's orders and there's suborders, there are infraorders, there's all of these subcategories, not just at the ordinal level, but at the class, the phylum level, the families, et cetera, and so forth. So it's not as neat and clean as you see there. But today we talk about parv orders. Anyway, the whales that are alive today are either toothed whales or baleen whales, and you can see they're mysticets with baleen. Donicets are toothed, and the important differences between baleen whales and toothed whales, other than the fact that toothed whales have teeth and baleen whales have baleen, the Adonicets have asymmetrical skulls. If you look at a toothed whale skull, sperm whales and all of the other toothed whales, it looks like somebody, like they were modeled in clay, and then as they were drying, one side sort of sagged. They're asymmetrical. They're noticeably not symmetrical when you look at them. Mysticets are. And the reason that they're asymmetrical, it has to do with echolocation. Because as you can see here, toothed whales echolocate, baleen whales don't. Baleen whales don't have to echolocate. And just as an interesting aside, those external nares, the blowholes in the common vernacular on the top of the skull, the blowholes in Adonicets, there's a single blowhole. Mysticets have two. They're paired. And there's a whole bunch of other differences I'll show you here in a second on a big table, but those are the ones that really are the most interesting. And I don't know if anybody wants a copy of this. I put this in here so you can have more terminology about whale stuff than anybody could possibly care about. But this is a little bit more important. This is the telescoping of the skulls. And here's a horse skull up here. This is A. And here you see a key to the names of all of these bones, which I'm sure as soon as we sign off tonight, you'll get yourself a cold beverage and start learning all of these skull bones here. But this is a horse skull. And here's where the external nares are here, right about here, right? Or in us, they're right in the front of the skull. This is what we didn't talk about, an archaeoset. These are all extinct. These were found during the Eocene. The Eocene started 56 million years ago, and they were short. They were about 9 feet long. They had heterodont dentition. Toothed whales today have what are called homodont dentition. All of those peg-like teeth are the same. Not only that, but archaeocets had a well-developed pelvic girdle, meaning they had hind legs. So they were kind of in the water and they could come back out, and then they'd go in the water and then they'd come back out. And there was no echolocation. Even though they were toothed whales, they didn't echolocate. Now, how can you tell that from fossil skulls and whatnot? We can get into that later if anybody cares. But here's an archaeocet skull. And you can see the external, the nare is receding backwards as this skull becomes telescoped. See all these bones up here on, I'm pointing to this like you can see what I'm pointing to.
Yeah, we can see when you're pointing.
All of these bones here, look at them back down here on these. This is a toothed whale here, and this is a baleen whale here. It's called telescoping. It's like the rostrum, the nasal bone, this premaxilla bone, and the maxilla bones all got drawn out. All the other bones got telescoped together, all shoved into each other. And look at where the external nare is now. Here's a toothed whale, baleen whale. They're back on the top of the skull.
So B kind of reminds me of like an alligator or crocodile. The B shape.
This archaeocet here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that, right. A little bit. Here's the two external nares on this photo on the left-hand side. And if you've ever been out whale watching, or you may have been lucky enough to see whales come up and blow. Here's two whales have come up and look at that big geyser of water coming up out of there. And, you know, you've all seen movies, the whaling ships, the guys up in the crow's nest. Not going to take time. Why do they call it a crow's nest? Since Phoenicians first put sails on boats thousands of years ago, the idea was to sail close to the coast. And because, you know, there's no navigation systems, there's no nothing. Get in a bad storm, you get blown out. It's gray, it's hazy. You have no idea which direction you're going, right? Well, up on the top of the mast, you literally had a crow in a cage. And if you had no idea which direction land was, you let the crow go. And they would know which direction land was, and you would follow them. Didn't know that, did you? See, I've got a lot of useless trivia. Anyway, the other question is, when the whale blows here, what's it blowing? What is that? That's water, isn't it? Where'd that water come from? Have they got lungs full of water? And they come up and they blow all the water out of their lungs? What do we call that when your lungs fill with water? Drowning. You call it drowning. It's very simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those lungs are not full of water. That's water that they've got nasal plugs. There's the nares obviously have to have heavy muscular muscles that contract so that the water, even under pressure, is not going to go down those nares into your lungs. But there is some water that collects on top of that muscle group there, and they come up, they blow that, plus they've got very warm breath that they're exhaling. This is cold. You can see the snow up on the mountains here. It's cold waters, cold air, and it condenses. That warm air condenses and forms what you see here to a large extent. So they're not blowing any water out of their lungs. Where did whales come from? What are the ancestors? Well, you see this big blue arrow down here, and this was an older figure that I had in earlier editions before people really could answer that question. And that big blue arrow, it says early Artiodactyla. Artiodactyls are hoofed mammals. They're terrestrial mammals. And in fact, whales did evolve from hoofed mammals, from terrestrial mammals. The earliest whales here you can see in the Eocene, this Pachyceta here, Pachycetidae, were the first ones that we are aware of. So you see this yellow question here? I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but I know I'm not going to get through all this. What time is it? What's closest relative to whales? Anybody want to take a guess? If you guess right, Nadine will take you to dinner tomorrow night.
Yeah.
I was going to say elephant.
Elephants. That is a very good guess. Why did you say elephants? It's wrong, but that's a good guess.
Okay. Oh,
I don't know. It just seemed right to me.
Okay. No, actually, the closest, what's so interesting is the closest relative of elephants is the manatees. Manatees are very
Manatees, I would
closely
guess.
related to
Yeah.
whales, or to
Yeah.
elephants and manatees. Actually, the closest relative to a whale is hippopotamus.
Oh,
Hippopotamus. And here's, so closest relatives, here's the current molecular base phylogeny. Phylogeny is just these things I've been showing you here, called cladograms or dendrograms or whatever you want to call them. But here are this perissodactyl is the out group. Those are hoof mammals, but they're not artiodactyls, they're perissodactyls. So all of these families right in here, with the exception of the whales, which is Cetacea right here, these are all families of artiodactyls. And you can see that the hippos and all the whales are what's called a sister group. This little monophyletic clade here shows that they're most closely related. And then these are suborders, these are infraorders, these are the pigs. This is a peccary and pig group here, the suids, the camel, and then here's all the other artiodactyls. So this is what we're talking about, but that's why it's no longer an order of its own. It's nested within the what is now called not artiodactyls, but set artiodactyls, the set from Cetacea and the artiodactyls. And boy, that's probably looks fuzzy on your screen too, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry. Okay, we don't need to worry about any of these family names, but these are all the different families of whales. And when you, again, this is another phylogeny with all the whales here. Here are all the toothed whales up on top. Here are all the baleen whales, and here's the family of hippopotamus down here. There's actually only 2 different species in this family of hippos. And again, odontocets are toothed whales, mysticets are baleen whales. So I'll show you some general characteristics of whales, and if we've got time, I'll run through very quickly examples of all of these different families so you can see what they look like. Okay, baleen whales, generally larger than toothed whales. Here's all the baleen whales up here, and then you can see toothed whales. The only toothed whale that morphologically is as large as any of the baleen whales is the sperm whale right here. That's a toothed whale. This is a beaked whale, which is a certain family, killer whale. But most toothed whales down here, look at where I'm putting the cursor down here. They're really small. I mean, they're big mammals. Don't get me wrong, compared to bats or rodents, but compared to whales, compared to baleen whales, they're small. Again, blue whale, largest animal ever lived. Many more species of toothed whales than there are of, these aren't all the species of toothed whales. There's more. I just couldn't get them all on this figure. And what was I going to say? Toothed whales, although they're smaller, they dive deeper. And that's sort of, it doesn't make sense because big things dive deeper than small things. Penguins can't dive very deep. Seals dive deeper. Sea lions dive deeper than seals because they're bigger. The walrus dives really deep, et cetera, and so forth. When you get really big things, they dive deep. But these whales, the big baleen whales, don't dive anywhere near as deep as almost all of these toothed whales. The sperm whale, they laid the Atlantic cable however many years ago, and it broke one time because there was a sperm whale got tangled up in it and broke it. Sperm whales dive all the way down to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. They can dive miles and miles and miles deep, where the pressure is well over a ton per square inch. And on this body, there's a lot of square inches. Amazing hydrostatic pressure they can withstand. Baleen whales, if they needed to or wanted to, could dive even deeper because they're bigger. But why don't baleen whales dive any deeper than they do? Okay.
Food?
Food. What about food?
Well, what they eat isn't deep.
Here, you want my cursor? You can do this. You don't need me. Yeah, what do they eat?
Little things.
Little things, plankton. I'll show you the little things here in a second. Plankton, or what's referred to as nekton, but stuff that's usually about a ½ inch long, centimeter or less. And what does plankton do? It all congregates. It's called krill. Have you heard the term krill? Yeah. Yeah, the krill congregates in big masses, and it's shallow. It's in shallow water. And I'm sorry, I don't know the lady that's down in the bottom of my screen here, but why is that krill not deep? Why is it so shallow?
Well, they need food too.
And what do they eat?
Sunlight, or they need sunlight though.
Smaller things.
I'll tell you, you've heard the krill are what are referred to as zooplankton. And then there's phytoplankton. The phytoplankton photosynthesizes. It has to have light.
sunlight.
So the phytoplankton needs the sun, the zooplankton's eating the phytoplankton, the whales are eating the whole shebang. So these big baleen whales don't need to die. They don't have to be small. Why are toothed whales so much smaller? If you were bigger, you could dive deeper. But they're small because if you're small, you can be a lot faster and relatively maneuverable. Big baleen whales are big, but they're not, big things are not maneuverable. They're not fast. You have to, if you're going to catch mid to large size fish, you better be really fast, right? And that's why toothed whales are the size they are. And again, here's just differences between the two. And we've talked about the important ones, baleen versus teeth, the external nares, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about echolocation in toothed whales here in a second, but toothed whales echolocate and their skulls are asymmetrical. And the one thing is, can you see the cursor down here? See it bouncing around? Toothed whales echolocate the tympanoparietic bone not attached to the skull. Again, I do this with students and stuff, and tympanoparietic bones, just think of your auditory bulla. Just think of your middle ear. Your middle and inner ear is surrounded by an auditory bulla. If you look at a skull, it's that kind of round thing that's on the ventral surface of the skull. Here, look at those bones are not attached to the skull. I know that kind of makes not much sense, but they don't float free, but they're in this matrix of real heavy foamy ligaments, and there's actually a foam that's compressible, but those bones are not attached to the skull. And there's a reason for that. And we'll get to that here in a second, okay? Here's a toothed whale on the right, and you can see the teeth, and here's baleen. See on this top photo here, the white fringy stuff is baleen. And this actually, it looks like column or tooth or something. This is I think this is a great big bowhead whale. It's got a whole bunch of barnacles and whale lice up on the top here, but this is baleen down here as well. What's baleen? It's only found in the upper jaw. There's no baleen in the lower jaw. There's a whole bunch of baleen plates, anywhere from 150 to 450 total plates in the upper jaw of a baleen whale, and they're fringed. And here's a single plate. Here's a single baleen plate, and these, I'll show you the lengths of outer fringes of baleen here in a second, but they range from very small to really large in bowhead whales, for example. And again, this is a transverse section that you're looking at in the lower picture here in this figure. It's like a cut through the head, and you can see here's the upper jaw, and here's the baleen here. Here's the tongue, and here's the lower jaw. Okay. This stuff, the baleen is made of the same stuff your fingernails are made out of, keratinized protein. So it's kind of hard, but this stuff is fringy, and basically this is just a big sieve is what it forms. All of those baleen plates, okay? All of this stuff where the cursor is, fringes forming a filter mat. What did I call it before? A sieve, right? But it catches stuff. So here's what baleen, relative sizes of baleen. The smallest whale, Minke's whale, and here's a guy next to a beached Minke's whale, so you can see how small they are. Very small, less than a meter here. F is the humpback whale that we're familiar with over here. It's getting bigger. A blue whale you'd think has the biggest baleen, and it's pretty big. It's H. It's a couple of meters there. But then here's the bowhead whale. That can get up to like 15 feet long, about 5 meters here. Bowhead whale, the maxillary portion of the bowhead whale, it's extremely arched, And that's why they call it a bowhead whale, because it looks like a bow. And you can get really big, long slabs of baleen in there. So how does it all work? And again, here's a lateral section across here. So here's the upper jaw. Here's, can you see the cursor? I'm up on A here. Here's the upper jaw. Here's the baleen. Here's the tongue. So what a whale is underwater, what it does, it actually is swimming very fast when it opens its mouth. And there's a lot of drag on that lower jaw, tons of pressure, but we don't care about that. It can be sitting still for all we care. It's underwater, it opens its mouth. And so it opens its mouth and water is going to rush in. And here's all the krill. All those little dots are krill there. It rushes in, and here you can see the lower jaw, the throat pouch here. And here you can see, these are called rorquals. The really big baleen whales are called rorquals, and that's Norwegian for tube-throated. So these tubes here, or pleats, allow that gullet area to expand. When a blue whale goes underwater and opens up its mouth like that, and all the krill are being sucked in, it holds about 16,000 gallons of water can go in there. So then after they've done this, then they close their mouth and they squirt water out the side through the baleen and out the sides of the mouth. So then they close that, then they take their tongue and just lick that baleen and swallow, or the baleen, lick the krill and swallow it. And then they do it over again. They don't have to chase it. They don't have to run it down. They just have to find it. And once they found it, they just go in, open their mouth, and they do this. There's a few variations on that theme, and we'll get to that in a second. But here's the small stuff. Right down here, here's 1 centimeter, and a lot of this stuff is even less than a centimeter. A centimeter is about ½ an inch, right? But this is the material from about 1, 2, 3, 4. Here, right whales, blue whales, sei whales, young fin whales, all feed on 1, 2, and 3 size stuff. Stuff about a centimeter long. Sorry. And other baleen whales feed on 4, 5, and 6. You're getting up to 10 centimeters, up to 1 meter. And here's all the toothed whales up here that are feeding on this stuff from 10 centimeters in length up to, these are giant squid that sperm whales feed on that can be up to, 30 feet long. And interestingly, people have taken sperm whales. I got a picture of a piece of sperm whale skull skin in the last couple of editions of the book, and it shows these big scars from suckers of giant squid. These giant squid that are obviously fighting for their life and probably lost. But they leave their mark. So when whales dive, whether they're diving deep, whether they're diving shallow, what do? Well, what do we do when we're going swimming? Here, this guy's out, obviously not in a pool, but you were all kids, and you probably had something got thrown on the bottom of the pool, and you're a kid. And so what do you do when you dive down to the bottom of the pool? You stand on the edge of the pool and you go, and you jump in the water, right? Get as much water and air in your lungs as you can. Whales do just the opposite. They take a couple of deep breaths. They expel as much air as they possibly can from their lungs, and then they go under. They don't want a whole lung full of air down under pressure on a deep dive. If you're diving, 1 mile or 2 deep in the ocean, if you're going down 10,000 feet, incredible amount of pressure. We haven't got time to, it's really for every what is it? Every 10 meters you go down, there's one increase in atmospheric pressure. Right now, we're at sea level. There's about 15 pounds of atmospheric pressure per square inch on your body right now. You go down 10 meters, if you dive 30 feet, that's an additional atmospheric pressure. So a sperm whale that's diving miles and miles, you can imagine these whales don't want a lot of air in their lungs because number one, they don't want to be that buoyant. Number two, if you got a whole bunch of air that you bring down with you, what happens when you pop up, if you've been down under pressure for any length of time and you pop right up, you get the bends. And that's due to the pressure. And most air that you breathe is nitrogen, right? 79% nitrogen. And what happens is that nitrogen, as you go deeper and deeper, it goes into solution, it goes into your blood. And before it can be absorbed, if you pop up too fast, that nitrogen comes out of solution too fast, it congregates in your joints and you get the bends and you can actually die. It'll kill you. So expel air from their lungs. And unlike these scuba divers here, they certainly aren't taking air down with them externally. That's why you get the bends, because that air is under pressure anyway, and if you come up too fast. Anyway, whales, unlike us and other terrestrial mammals, they use about 3 times more oxygen when they take a breath. When they inhale, they're getting about 12% of the oxygen out of the air. We get 4%. When you exhale, you're exhaling 96% of the oxygen that you've inhaled, which is when you're giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, that's a good thing, right? You don't want to be just blowing carbon dioxide into this poor guy. But we are relatively inefficient getting oxygen out of the air compared to whales. They're also more efficient in getting oxygen into their bloodstream. Their hematocrit, the amount of red blood cells they have, is twice what we have. And the red blood cells have the hemoglobin, which binds oxygen, right? Well, myoglobin, which is found in mussels, also binds oxygen. And whales have 2 to 9 times more myoglobin than terrestrial mammals. Plus, just like ducks and any other diving birds, anything that goes underwater shows a diving response. And that is, there's a reduced blood flow to the peripheral limbs. Just the major organs, the heart and the brain, get blood until they come back up. And they exhibit bradycardia, their heartbeat slows down, and they have a very high tolerance for carbon dioxide buildup and lactic acid, which if you have an oxygen deficit, you have to be able to tolerate carbon dioxide and lactic acid. So when they come up to the surface, if they've really been very deep, they'll stay at the surface and they'll blow, but then they'll continue while repaying that oxygen debt, getting rid of that lactic acid that's in their muscles and cleaning out all that CO2. So again, hydrostatic pressure at depth, the body tissues are permeated with non-compressible fluids. And again, they don't bring any air down in their lungs. Toothed whales echolocate. I want to try and get through this. The echolocation pulse is through the muscles of the external nares. And here's flipper here. Here's flipper. So one, the sound is, and this muscle group, it's called the phonic lips. It basically, contractions and relaxations make the clicks and the pulses and the sounds that are used in sounds generated up in passages through what's called the melon. And that melon is filled with spermaceti, and it's an oil. And when whalers were going for whale oil that was used in lamps, you know, throughout the 1700s, 1800s, this is the stuff they were looking for. But what that does is it attenuates the sound so that that sound that goes out from the whale doesn't go in all directions, because then you're going to get less of an echo coming back, but it attenuates it. It narrows it down so that it's in fact a beam, that's as it's shown here. That beam goes off Mr. Squid here. Well, the echo comes back, and the echo, the sound actually goes through the lower jaw. And there's that same oil is in the lower jaw. So as it says here, reflected under through the jawbone. And here's where that tympanic bone is right here. That's basically, consider it your drum, okay? That's where they hear. And the reason that bone isn't connected to the skull is, have any of you guys ever done any scuba diving or snorkeling where you're underwater for a while and you hear some sounds? Nobody? If you're in trouble, if you're a diver and you're under trouble, you know, you're supposed to take a knife or some object, which lets your partner know, lets other people know, because that sound travels a long way. But the problem is you have no idea what direction that sound is coming from. Next time you have access to a swimming pool, have somebody go in there and bang a couple of rocks together underwater while you're underwater, and close, and you have no idea where that sound's coming from. It sounds like it's coming from everywhere, because in fact it is. Because our tympanic bones, our auditory bulla, connected to our skull. That sound is waves are going through every part of your skull, and you can't differentiate that sounds coming. Bulls have to know exactly where that echo's coming from, as we talked about with bats before. You know, how far away is it? How fast is it moving? Where is it going? What is it? And so that sound wave comes back, and it can be localized, directional. It can be directionally localized because that tympanoperiodic bone is not connected. It's coming from everywhere. It's just coming from one spot. So insulation of the ear, about localized detached tympanoperiodic bones, and echolocation patterns, just like bats. Every species, it's species specific, these echolocation patterns. And so if you're studying this stuff and you've got you're picking up these sounds, you can differentiate one species from another, okay? So here's our echolocating, same as our dolphin here, echolocating. Wish this thing wouldn't pop up saying you have an unstable internet connection.
Yeah,
and here's the same thing that submarines use to echolocate. And oops, here's an island. We're in trouble. What? Okay. Baleen waves don't, okay, but they sing, don't they? Are famous for their songs. I don't know whether it's Joni Mitchell or Judy Collins or somebody did an album with whale sounds. Anybody remember that? Not really? Okay. Somebody just popped in like they remember it. Anyway, baleen whales sing. The humpback whales are most famous for their songs, but right whales sing as well. And thing. They have calls, an up, a down, a high, a hybrid, a pulsive, and a constant. And it's really not known exactly what they mean, but you know, for breeding purposes, it might be the high call. Nobody really knows, but they make a lot of different sounds, and a lot of people study this stuff. Humpback whales songs are almost for sure for breeding purposes. Males all sing the same song. It's species specific, it's not individual specific. What's interesting is that song changes throughout the season. And it's different, completely different at the end of the season than it was at the beginning of the season. So it's different each year. And as you might expect, sounds travel a lot longer, greater distance through water, don't they, than they do in air. It's a denser medium, it carries sound 7 times faster than air, something like that, I don't know. Okay, anybody have any questions up to this point? I'm gonna run through, in the remaining 10 minutes, I'll run through, we'll actually look at some real whales. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to jump in. Anybody have a quick question now?
How long is the longest that a whale can stay under the water?
Well, it would be not humpback whales, sperm whales. You know, they dive the deepest and they can stay under the water the longest. And it turns out, I'll show you some what are called beaked whales, the family Ziphidae. And those beaked whales, surprisingly, can stay under for a lot longer than anybody thought that they could. You know, 3-4 hours at a time. And they're deep, you know, they're down a couple thousand feet for 3-4 hours, which is incredible. I mean, they're toothed whales, but they're not that, for a toothed whale, they're not that big. But sperm whales can stay down for hours and hours and hours and hours. And when they go down, they actually, and this is just, I used to do a little bit of scuba diving, so I'm kind of interested in the dynamics of diving and pressure and all this sort of thing. When they go down at an angle, and they go down very deep, and they stay down a long time foraging, but when they come up, they come straight up. They pop straight up to the surface as fast as they can, recharge, get the oxygen. If a recreational diver, the limit for recreational diving, you're not supposed to go below 120 feet. And if you can stay down 120 feet about 8 minutes, and then because you have to come up and depressurize at different depths, you know, you take about 3 stops for about 5 minutes at different depths to get that nitrogen out of your system. Sperm whales just, I mean, if a diver did that, I mean, it would kill them. It really would. All right, let's look at some whales.
Deborah asked, where, she said, where do you find whales in lakes? You talked about whales in lakes.
I'll show you some.
Okay.
These are the river dolphins. They're called river dolphins. And they used to be a single family, Platanistidae, but now they've been broken into several different families, and the taxonomy is still a little up in the air. But I'll show you. They're very small, and they're I was going to say they're blind as a bat. That's kind of an intentional mixed metaphor, I know, but bats aren't blind, and neither are these things. But these things are close to being blind. But I'll show you some. Here's the family Escherichtidae. These are the gray whales, gray with an A. If you're in England, gray, British gray is Grey, if you weren't aware of that. Beach gray whale. And what's interesting is this one was beached off of Newport, Oregon, back about 1978. And it happened right when the American Society of Mammalogists were meeting about an hour away in Corvallis. So a whole bunch of them came out and took some of these photos. And what you see down here is the baleen. Okay, you can see it better in this photo right here. Here's the baleen there. Again, gray whales are interesting. They forage very shallow waters, and they actually skim the surface, or not the surface. Actually, they do skim for krill on the surface, but they'll also, with this short baleen, they go through the mud on the bottom of the ocean for clams, oyster, shellfish, things like that, whatever's on the bottom. And here's this gray whale snake. We talked about baleen whales being under the water, opening up their mouths, the water. Oh, they also do this occasionally. They'll just skim through some krill just like this. They'll close their mouth, squirt it out through this baleen here.
Somebody was
And
asking,
here's a whale. This is a gray whale. It's underneath, and you can see it's got a mouth full of water because this area, this throat area, is all distended, but it's getting rid of all of that water. It's blowing it out through the baleen right here. These whales are bubble netting, and what they do, there's a group of whales, and they'll get together and they form a circle, and they all exhale at the same time, and it forces all of the krill into a column, and then the whales swim up from the bottom of that column, coming up through the krill, gobbling up the krill. It's called bubble netting. It's a group dynamic. And you'll see a lot of birds around foraging whales because a lot of times the fish get squeezed out and the birds are there to scoop them up. And unfortunately, accidents happen. Here's a skimming whale. This is photoshopped. This doesn't happen. I don't know why I put that in there, but it's a cheap laugh. Okay. Thank you for the cheap laugh. Okay, we've only got 5 minutes left according to my watch, but I'll go as we're not going to get through all of this, but I can finish it if you want. We can quit whenever you want. This is a different family. This is the family for right whales. This is the family Balenidae. Why are they called the right whales? There's northern and southern right whale. Both of them are endangered. They're the right whale. They're called right whales because they were the right whale harpoon. When they're dead, they float on the top of the water longer than other whales do. So whalers could get a rope around them, tie them, get them back to the system. Other big whales would sink. It's an awful lot of work. It's dangerous, and they don't get any reward for it. These were the right whales to harpoon. Closely related to right whales in the same family, the Balenidae, bowhead whales. Again, almost all big whales are endangered, but here you can see that bowed head that we talk about. And these are Alaskan Inuits, subsistence hunters. They take about one bowhead whale a year. Although some experts say that that's actually negatively impacting the population. It is an endangered species, but they are Native Americans and they're allowed to take them. Pygmy right whales are in a family of their own here, and you can see why they're called pygmy right whales. See how small they are? And interestingly enough, they beach more than a lot of other whales. Out in the open ocean, people who study these things almost never see them. Apparently, they're very difficult to find out in the real world. Okay, these are the big whales, the Balaenopteridae, humpback blue sayfin. See this whale right here? Minke's whale is the smallest, the second smallest. How do you pronounce that?
rides.
Just jump right in. There's no wrong answers here. How about in the interest of that's actually Norwegian. It's Bruda. That's everybody says bride's whale. It's Bruda's whale. Here's humpbacks that we're all familiar with, about 36 feet long. Here's Mom and Junior here, well known for those elongated flippers. You can see the pleats in the rorqual in the throat region. Here's a humpback with Junior. Can you see the baby right here? Right on her right-hand side here is a young one. I don't know if you can see it. And this is escorting. She's surrounded by, there's no other word for it. She's surrounded by females. She's given birth to a calf. She's getting ready to breed again, and they want to be the lucky winner. Whale watching. Any of you guys ever done it?
Yeah, I get seasick, so it wasn't
I-
fun.
Boy, it's really becoming very, very popular. And so there's so many boats and so many people that they try very hard to regulate how close you can get, how long you can be there, etc. Okay. This is breaching. Again, why do they breach? A lot of experts say it's just for fun because they can. Others say it's to get a better look around their surroundings. You know, make sure they know where they are, what's around them. And that's just kind of an artsy, crafty whale tail. It's a fluke, but it doesn't rhyme. Anyway, some of the longer whales, very, very long, very sleek. Nadine, I've got it 8 o'clock. Tell me when we're done. Here's a blue whale with a calf, and the calf is blowing there. Here's a blue whale skeleton. See the lower jaw on this blue whale?
Yeah.
That's the longest bone of any animal that's ever lived.
Wow.
The longest single bone. And here's a dead blue whale. It got hit by a floating belly up. It looks fun, it's floating belly up. Fin whales, these are very, very fast and they're monogamous, which is unusual for whales. And they have a very distinctive fin. Here's Brude's whale. And it's named for a Norwegian. And then there's Minke's whale. This is the one that the large whales are they're commercially extinct. They're obviously not biologically extinct, but populations are so low, it doesn't really pay to hunt them anymore. And there's only a couple of countries. Japan hunts them. Iceland, unfortunately, still takes some. Peru takes a couple of whales.
It is 8 o'clock, George.
Huh? It's
It
8
is
o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Okay, we're done. This is a Japanese whaling vessel, and I don't know if you can read the sign. It says legal research under the something or other. They call it research. They've been doing this research for years and years. They never published anything on it. It's an excuse to take Minke's whales. Okay. Sometime we'll get into toothed whales. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, it really has.
Thank you. We'll try to figure out if we can reschedule some time to go through the ends of your other programs. So.
Sure, that's fine. Sounds like a winner. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
You
so
guys
much,
have a good
George.
night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.